Welcome to the Unmuted Podcast. My name is Jeff. I'm your host, and this is a podcast where we talk about all things HR, talent, HR tech, and the world of work. So we talk about lots of things with lots of different guests, HR TA leaders, and practitioners from around North America. And so this is a really good episode, as I always say. This is a topic, it's high performance in a human-centered world. So it's a really interesting topic, and we have a fantastic guest here today. But before I bring her on, I just want to talk about a couple of things. Well, first of all, the episodes live on our website, GoScaleHR.com, and also on our YouTube channel as well. So please chime in, comment. So once again, high performance in a human-centered world. So what that really means is there's a new pressure now. So performance management, employee performance is now back. But the context has changed. And so obviously 5 years ago with the start of the pandemic, things changed as to how we operated our businesses, how we treated our employees, how we performance manage, all of those stuff, types of things. Now we're in an era of economic pressure, which is forcing many organizations to double down on productivity, performance, and then also efficiency as well. So this is understandable. Obviously, there's no pressure, the market being tighter, budgets are leaner, and the expectations are much higher. But we're also in a time of deep complexity for people. And I think we've always had this, but I think it's sort of even more so now. We have things like burnout, which has been a hot topic for the last number of years, social unrest, but with a lot of different things happening globally. Obviously mental health struggles and challenges, global conflict. And then, of course, the explosion of AI, which I talk about often, and really continued uncertainty. And I guess being in North America, obviously that is, quite prevalent right now. And so the question is, how do we lead teams through all of these truths at one time? So I think it's a complicated question. It's a complicated situation. But that's the first point. And I think point number two is really leadership. So there's a dilemma, right? Compete hard and care deeply. And I think, those two things may be of conflict, maybe not, but a high performance and human care aren't mutually exclusive. So they're often treated like they are. And so as leaders, we're being asked to compete hard and care deeply, which is really difficult to do. And so this episode is all about unpacking how we can do all of this well without falling either burnout culture or, expectation, complacency. So there's a lot there, I think. But we have a fantastic guest here, Gabrielle Caron, who's from Montreal. She is a senior HR leader at a company called 1Password. And I just want to welcome you to the podcast.
Thank you so much. I'm really happy to be here. This is the topic of the hour, I think, in all of our personal lives as well as our professional lives. So looking forward to unpacking it together.
Well, it's interesting that you mentioned that because people say, well, obviously, people talk about sort of separating personal and professional. I think we've had that conversation for over 10 years now. I've always been of the belief that you can't separate them. Mm-hmm. You can certainly manage them, but I definitely think that this topic is very relevant for both sides of it.
Yeah, 100%.
So before we dive into our topic here, maybe you could just tell our audience a bit about what you do, where you come from, who you are.
Yeah. Absolutely. So Gabrielle Caron, I'm based in Montreal, a native French speaker. So sometimes if you hear me stumble on my words or the strange little accent, it's the Francais. I am the VP of Talent, DIB, and People Analytics at 1Password. So my team and I really help build, adapt, and implement the people strategies that support 1Password in its mission to build a safer, simpler digital future for everyone. And we really try to be thought partners to the business through all of these complex times, like we said. And beyond that, I'm also quite the physical activity, so the sports fan. I practice a lot of different sports. I'm also a mom of 2 girls, an 8-year-old and a 13-year-old. And so a lot of how I actually think of these topics have, I think, analogies to the sports world, but also parenting. I very frequently re-raise how similar being a great leader is to being a good parent. So hopefully it's not I think there's similarities in everybody's realities and worlds, but those are 2 that are like near and dear to mine. And that help me keep this topic human.
Absolutely. And so I thought, I'm kind of like you actually. So, I grew up sort of playing a lot of sports. And so, so what are your, top two, sports?
Ooh, that's a tough one, Jeff. Top two. In the winter,
top
it's
three.
skiing. So in the winter, we're big skiers and we're backcountry skiers. We do touring and everything. My husband and the girls and I. And then in the summer, I've become more and more of a runner. I've got 2 half marathons back to back.
Really?
In the fall. So looking forward to that and getting into trail running as well. And then yoga, CrossFit would probably be.
You do CrossFit?
I do. I have since I think it's the beginnings.
Badass.
2020. This is the moment where I have to hold back to like not show my but I think it's a super empowering sport for being also a woman and a mom of girls. It's a place where I've found a lot of strength that I try to also bring into my work and day-to-day life.
Yeah, I mean, I could say the same thing about having 3 teenage boys, and definitely not 25 anymore, so I can't do the same things I used to. But no, I mean that's fantastic that that you're active with your family. That's great. So, okay, so let's sort of jump into our topic here. And how do you see the current focus on productivity and performance reshaping leadership and culture across organization?
Yeah. It's funny that you mentioned in your intro, you brought back COVID, because when I was reflecting on this topic, I was like, we say it's new, or it feels new to a lot of folks, but I think like not the first phase, but like in the last decade or so, we actually went through that shift during the pandemic for very different reasons, for the fact that people were suddenly being asked to be caregivers, to take care of themselves, their mental health, their well-beings. People had elderlies at home, they had kids. And so we had to really and companies were, had to keep the lights on. We're going through a ton of ambiguity and didn't quite know. And so what was going to happen. And so we really had to ask people to focus and prioritize and be really clear on like what they were trying to achieve, and focusing on the things that would move the needle. I think a lot of what we're seeing, the impact of this shift right now, is getting folks, instead of focusing on what you're putting into work, so the number of hours that you're putting into it, the number of tasks you're accomplishing, the number of meetings that you join, really focusing on the outcome. What's moving the needle? What's generating new products? What's allowing us to innovate? What's allowing us to generate ARR? And so really focusing on that outcome, I think, is one of the major shifts. And then it's asking ourselves, okay, well, how do we lead through that? How do we manage? And what does it mean to measure all of that? I think it's something we haven't fully figured out for most companies, but I'm looking forward to like talking through that, because it is definitely a shift. But I think it starts with acknowledging that the measure of success and excellence is not the same as it used to be.
That's really an interesting comment, because I think so my old phrase of the optics of butt in chair is kind of like what you're talking about. And we've been talking about that, for a long time. I mean, it's just trying to get people away from this really entrenched mindset that if they are physically there, or you can see them, somehow that's better, or that makes for, better employees in terms of outcome. Yeah, sure. I mean, if you're in a plant where you're making cars and, physically having to build something, sure. But for most of us who work in a professional sort of white collar environment where all you really need is your laptop, good Wi-Fi, screens, etc. I don't think that always true.
Yeah, 100%. And with the tool proliferation, I always struggle with that word. With the number of tools coming out right now in the market and AI, that's bound to also challenge that, right? Like necessarily it won't be about, and again, I don't want to get into the debate of like, should AI be cutting jobs or elevating jobs or whatnot, but it is a reality. It is here to stay, and it is allowing people to be more productive and stuff. So I do think that there's also a predominance of things happening in the market, like it's allowing us to, that's also supporting that shift. And so when all the winds are blowing in that direction, at one point, it's not about trying to resist. It's about figuring out, okay, well, how do I like surf that wave and do it sustainably,
So just sort of shifting gears here, a little bit. So we're trying to focus on more of these human lens. So how can leaders maintain empathy and care for people when people are dealing with so much outside of work without compromising actual accountability? Because that's a really delicate balance. So what would you say to that?
2 things. The first is the good old oxygen mask analogy. I think right now a lot of people are struggling with that, because very few people are putting on their own oxygen mask. So it's very hard to be an inspiring leader and an empathetic leader when you're potentially struggling yourself. So that's my first, I'll use this opportunity to put that disclaimer out there. I encourage everybody to figure out their own balance to then radiate that and inspire that across. The second piece I will say is my go-to topic is a parenting analogy. I was thinking about it and I was like, this is actually not very different than what we expect to do as parents. As parents, you want to raise these kids in a psychologically safe environment. You want to love them, care for them, be there for them. But ultimately, I think most parents would say that their ultimate goal is getting their child to achieve the great things that they're hoping to achieve in life. It's not necessarily to just have yes, it's happy individuals, but it's also some of our kids aspire to be these astronauts or great professionals, or some of them aspire to be great parents. But all of that means teaching them skills, getting them to focus on their goals, whether it be through their education, whether it be through their soft skills building, but all that through while caring for them, while being there for them. So if I bring that back to the workplace, what I like to do with my teams is I like to first understand what are their goals, what are they trying to achieve in the workplace, right? Then try to understand who they are as humans, what they're going through, and then making sure that we have time in our one-on-ones every week to really talk about what they're going through, how are they feeling personally, but also towards achieving some of these goals, and making sure that both of them always show up at the same time. And through that care and empathy, they also see my desire to help them succeed, help them be whatever they're aspiring to be in the workplace. And then the last piece, then I try to bring that all back to where is the company today? What are we doing? And then making sure that they know how their work fits into that. Because I think the other piece of empathy or really motivating teams during these changes is making sure they understand that they have a purpose, that they have a goal, and that all these efforts that they're putting into work right now actually contribute to that bigger picture.
I had a conversation with someone last week about this type of thing. And this person said to me, which was really interesting, was allowing for space. I said, oh, okay, so what do you mean by that? Yeah, I thought I knew. And so this person said to me, well, we spend so much time trying to get everything perfect. And then we're using tools, and obviously we're virtual and all these things, the technology, but also have to allow our people to have the space to be able to take care of some things, and personally, but not losing sight of the actual accountability piece of it, to give that flexibility and trust, but really to kind of sort of step back a little bit and just allow them the space to be able to do something. I think
it goes back to counting the hours, right? It goes back to counting the hours, the hours that you show up on meetings. I think that's definitely one of the easy levers to pull to make sure that people have this space. I think also people like to feel like all of it has a meaning, all of it is seen and works towards something. So I think the empathy piece is creating the space, is encouraging people to take care of their mental health, of their well-being. And I could speak to that. We have ways we do that at 1Password. So I think it's doing all of those things, but then remembering that as a manager or people leader, your mandate or the role you play at that point is within an organization. And so making sure that you help connect the dots between I see you, I hear you, you have space for that, but I'm also going to be there. My role is also to be there to encourage you and make you feel like you fit in and like you're playing a part in this. So I'm seeing you run fast and try to juggle all these things, but it's doing something. It's contributing. I think that also really goes a long way, right? Those tap on the shoulder and tap on the back, you're doing a great job and it matters. I think it's
absolutely important. Okay, so getting into some sort of practical things, right? So both of us talked a bit about that as we were planning for this episode. So what are some practical things that organization can do to reinforce a high performance culture that's still healthy and sustainable?
Yep. So I think the first is defining what it is, right? I think what we've seen at 1Password recently, the more we talk about this, is that a lot of people are like, wait a minute, what do you actually mean by that? You're talking about this, and it's a word that I think if undefined and uncontextualized or gone without being put into the broader context can feel very scary and toxic, especially at a time where people are under a lot of pressure on the personal front. So the first is defining it, explaining it, and then weaving that into all of your touch points, all the human touch points. So one-on-ones, all hands. Some people do it within their performance reviews, but just making sure that expectation and definition is consistently reminded, and the why it matters, so that it's not just a token word that's being taken out of context. I would say that's the first. The second is create space, have space for people to recharge. like all professional athlete, I went to this conference last Thursday on recuperation and the importance of it for high achievers. And it was they were interviewing Olympic athletes, and all Olympic athletes, after they really push through and go through a blitz for a competition, they will take time after to recharge and reboot. So at 1Password, we have 25 days of PTO. We've got 4 wellness days spread throughout the year, and we're a remote first company. So people should feel empowered and have the space to really, if you need to block time after difficult meetings, or if you need to block days to have focus times or whatnot, you should feel empowered to do that, right? Because you're in a remote setting, as well as use all the time that's offered to you. So I think the second piece is really that. So once you've defined it, made sure that you've got the infrastructure and the time to make sure that people are recuperating. I would say those are like 2 very simple tactical ways. The third is probably upskilling, training people on how to lead in that, how to manage your stress, how to set a vision, how to have empathetic conversations. Those are just like a few of the trainings, but I think anybody that's running fast needs those. Again, like if you take athletes will have consistent training. They'll have psychologists near them. They'll have trainers, coaches, and stuff like that. So I think it's the same a bit in the workplace, right? We need to make sure we're weaving in place for people to reflect on how they're approaching this culture shift in the workplace.
It's interesting that you talked about training, because I always get a lot of pushback on that. And that's something that I've always believed in my entire 25-year career. And people say, well, we don't have time. I said, make time, because I'll tell you one thing: if you don't make time for it, then 6 months from now, 3 months from now, you will have a problem. And also too, when you put managers and leaders into positions of power, and you haven't given them those tools to actually execute properly, you're going to have problems. And this doesn't mean go send them on like an MBA course to some school. That's not what I'm talking about here. I'm talking about lightweight, easy things that you can do within groups and also, individually. But you should be making time for that. It is an investment, ongoing investment, and it needs to be done.
And you know what, like for trainings to see the upside and the results of trainings, people have to believe in it, and they have to actually, participate, and they have to be tailored to how people learn and what they're looking to get out of it. So I understand that we're in busy times, but then that means, hey, L&D teams, let's think even harder. How else? There must be a way. If there's a will, there's a way. It's a bit cheesy, but I think it's true, right? And so if we believe in the programming that we've got and the value of it, let's partner with the business and figure out how can we make this easy for you guys to digest? How can we make this accessible in these busy times?
Yeah.
Because you're right. I think even just as parents, right, when we're like busy in the routine of nighttime, bedtime routines, people with toddlers will resonate to this. It gets really busy. It's fast. It's spinning all around. If we don't take it, often that's when we're at risk of becoming those parents that yell all the time, or that are not really centered. So sometimes you just need a moment to take a step back, take a breather, remind yourself what you're trying to accomplish and like your best practices of the parent you want to be, and then you go back to bath time.
What she's really saying is that it's easier to talk about, but not really, that easy to do.
100%.
I raised my hand on that one. So we talk about high performance often, and I always ask people this type of thing, because they struggle with telling me what that actually means. And so I'm just wondering, if we were to redefine high performance for today's workforce, what needs to change?
One, an acknowledgement that it's not the same everywhere. High performance may not look and feel the same. Like I said earlier in the podcast, it's really about output. And so it's about knowing what's outcomes. It's really about outcomes. So it's what matters. So within sales, high performance means selling, through generating ARR. Like that's the ultimate and probably like employer brand and making sure that that the way it's sold resonates. I think what needs to change across the organization, that it's not a one size fits all. It's about clarifying what it means within each teams, what matters most, what contributes to the overall company goals, and then how do we help people get there. So it's a lot of words, but essentially I really think it's stepping away from this one size fits all, cookie cutter. High performing is this one thing. High performing means a high performing athlete is one that wins a lot of medals. A high performing employee is one that helps achieve the mission they were hired to achieve, and doing that well in a sustainable manner.
I think that's perfect. I remember when I used to lead HR teams, and would say, well, this person isn't like a high achiever, and I go, well, show me what they've done. They list out all these things, And I asked them, so what did you actually hire this person to do? And they go A, B, and C. And I said that, it looks pretty similar to me.
Yeah.
I'm like, this person's only been working for 3 years. They're 26 years old, and you've hired them to do a certain thing. They're not going to have the same outcomes as someone who is a chief marketing officer. You have to temper your expectation based on what you've hired them to do.
100%. But you know what else? When I go back to your question on what's changed or what we need to think about, what has changed is how fast the world is moving and how fast things are changing. So I do think that what we hired someone to do should be reevaluated probably on a yearly basis. To be sure that we're coaching that individual and that individual understands how their role has evolved. So basically that individual, without any coaching, it's normal that even if they're still doing A, B, and C, which you hired them to do A, B, and C, well, A, B, and C today doesn't look like A, B, and C a year ago. And that's on us to coach people through that, to be really clear on what's evolved, what's changed, and how can they get to the new A, B, and C. And I think in partnership with empathy, with coaching, with a lot of thoughtfulness and purposefulness is absolutely doable. But it's not something that you can expect to do overnight, right? Most of our iPhones don't necessarily update or auto do the software updates without us saying, yes, please go do. Well, they kind of do, but you know what I mean? Like, so maybe it's not the best analogy, but I think we kind of expect people to evolve sometimes without the clear definition or the clear expectation setting conversation.
I strongly believe that now with like AI being a big part of sort of how we work, I think I'm really confident in saying, I want to hear your personal view on this, that it is an expectation for all people to be much more efficient and then also effective in terms of their roles by leveraging AI. And so that might mean different things for different people, but there's no reason why, like take HR for example, right? We should be 40%, 50% more efficient today than we were just 3 or 4 years ago, and that's because of AI, right? And so I think it's really critical for us as the HR community to really understand that, because if you're not on board with this and you're not trying these tools and figuring out how you can use them in every part of your role, you will fall behind, and that high performance thing will just come past you.
Yeah, and that's a good example, because somebody that was hired a year ago, let's say 2 years ago. 2 years ago technically isn't that long ago, right? 2 years ago, they might have been hired with a certain job descriptions. Fast track to today, 2 years later, they're doing the exact same thing they were doing. It used to be great. It's still really good. But if they're not adapting to the market, to the tools available, to the philosophy, then they will be falling behind. So it's making sure that you're being clear on that and on, okay, what does it mean today? What does that look like today? Why do we want you to use those tools? How can I help you use those tools? Let me hear you on your concern. We can talk through. So again, the empathy piece, I understand people have concerns around AI. I understand people have concerns around certain job shifts. And sometimes we'll come to the conclusion that maybe it's not the right place for certain people, right? People will have to make career decisions, and I fully respect that. And I think we should be able to have those conversations openly and honestly. But I think for the rest, there are a lot that are on board, but we're just not facilitating the conversation to be able to say, like, let me help you get there. Let me help you understand what it takes now, what I'm expected of you, and how can we work together to see if it's a match and allow you to be successful and be that high performer that the organization is so greatly celebrating.
Yeah, perfect. So what is one thing that of your takeaway from what you talked about today? Just one thing that, if there's anything that they even paid attention to.
I think the first that we're really seeing and that I'm hearing is don't be afraid. Don't let the term scare you away. Don't let the term detract you. One, because there is a reason behind this shift, the economic context, AI, and so on and so forth. And that's here to stay for at least the foreseeable future. So the best you can do is don't let it scare you. Lean into the change, ask questions, ask for clarity. And it's all going to be okay. And surround yourself by great leaders. But that's it. Yeah, I think they'll be intimidated.
On that note, thank you very much. I really appreciate your time. It was good chatting with you. Thanks for being here. I appreciate you being on the podcast. And so for all of our viewers, this is the Unmuted Podcast. We try to drop new episodes every Thursday morning, and we talk about all things HR, talent, world of work, and the episodes live at GoScaleHR.com, which is being revamped, and also YouTube as well. And so please chime in, share your comment, and so on. So Gabby, thanks for being here.
Thanks for having me, Jeff.